You're listening to A Slice of Therapy with me, Alun Parry. When I was growing up, if ever you wanted to know anything, find out some specialised bit of information, my equivalent of Google was the person who worked behind the reference desk of my local library. You could phone this person up and you could give them your strange, unusual query. And they would go and find out what book you needed, or they would even go through their reference library and find out the answer themselves. I always thought that was kind of a fun job, getting random queries from people and then being able to find out the answer of a question that you'd never even contemplated before. But of course, these days, when I want information, I go on Google and I search the internet. But that wasn't around when I was a boy. And so our access to information, now that we have the World Wide Web, is phenomenal. It's exploded the amount of knowledge that we have at our fingertips. And yet, doing the things that would help us improve in whatever area, actually doing the things, is still really difficult. We might have a lot more information, but I don't find things like exercise and dieting and decluttering my house, any of these things really, any easier. It seems that even though we've got a lot more information available, a lot more knowledge at our fingertips, we're still facing the same kind of obstacles. And so it shows us that the thing that we don't need really is more information. Like, we know, for instance, that certain foods are going to put weight on. We know, for instance, that exercise is good for us. We know a load of these things. And we've actually got more and more and more information to tell us why, to back it up. We can Google the best diet. We can Google a great exercise regime. We know that social media isn't that great for us. And yet, change remains out of reach. Now that shows us that the problem isn't a lack of information, because we've got lots and lots of that. So the problem must be something else. And thankfully there is a whole field of research called behaviour design. And this field of behavioural science has actually broken down how we actually design in what we might think of as wanted behaviours and design out those behaviours that we don't want. And so in this episode, I'm going to show you the 3 steps to go through in the right order in order to design new behaviours into your schedule, and how to use that same system to design the ones you don't want back out again. Now, the 3 things that I'm going to look at are prompts, the level of ease, and your level of motivation. And I'm going to do it in that order, which might seem a little bit counterintuitive, because often what happens is if we want people to do something, we will kind of throw in a reward, threaten a punishment. And these are the ways in which we try and get people to do the things that we want, or even get ourselves to do the things that we want. But in actual fact, trying to change our motivation is the most difficult part. And so the low-hanging fruit, if you like, of behaviour design is to start with prompts. So there's three things. I'll go through them in turn: prompts, the level of ease, and the level of motivation. So let's start with prompts. In my phone, I've got a piece of software called Life Reminders. And I put that piece of software in there for a very simple reason. Every week, when we have, the refuse collectors come round and collect our bins, guess who kept forgetting? Now, it's every Friday morning that my bins get collected and emptied by the refuse collectors. But I'd wake up on Friday mornings to see all my neighbours' bins scattered around the neighbourhood having been emptied and realise, no, I've missed it again. And so I installed a piece of software into my phone where I could tell myself, I could remind myself of things that needed to be done. I didn't have to remember things anymore. I set up a prompt. And so every Thursday on my phone, it flashes up with a buzz and it says, empty your bins. And so I do. And so when it came to emptying my bins, or rather putting my bins out so that they could be collected the next morning, I never forget anymore. I didn't have to work on increasing my motivation, try and give myself a reward for putting the bins out. All I needed was a prompt. So that's the first one. How can you ensure that you have a prompt for the thing that you need? The second thing is the level of ease. If something is hard to do, we're going to be less likely to do it. If something's really easy to do, we're going to find it really easy to do it. Now, I know somebody who is an artist, and he went for a while without doing any art whatsoever. And when he analysed it using this system, what he realised was that it was actually too difficult to do the art. He'd actually created quite a bit of friction between him and the thing that he wanted to be doing. All of his art stuff was packed away. And so even when he had a prompt, like his own impulse, even when he thought, I'd really like to do art today, it was such a hassle getting everything out and getting everything ready that he tended not to do it. And so he made that easier. He actually set out all of his art stuff, and he set himself a space in his house where his art stuff would be. And so any moment he gets the impulse, he's just a couple of seconds away from being able to start, because his pencils are out, his paint is out, his canvas is at the ready, and he can simply start doing the art. Now, he hasn't increased his motivation to do it because he was already motivated. He wanted to do art. All he did was changed the level of ease by which he could. So we've looked at prompts. We've looked at making it easy to do the thing that you want. Finally, let's look at motivation. Now, as I say, motivation should be your last step rather than your first, because the other two are more likely to get you a result. But nonetheless, sometimes we do have to deal with motivation. And so when it comes to motivation, a good question to ask is, do I actually want this? Now, that applies to two things. Do I actually want this result? And do I actually want this path to getting the result? So let's say, for instance, that, you had somebody who was trying to get customers for their company. Now, they want customers for their company, so their motivation is high there, but where their motivation is low is that they really don't like cold calling. There's nothing really that's going to make them motivated to get up in the morning and think, oh, wonderful, I'm going to make phone calls to interrupt strangers in their homes, many of whom are going to be annoyed at me, and that's going to be my day-to-day. Some people enjoy that, but let's say this person doesn't. And so there's no way that they're going to be able to increase their motivation to do that. But of course, that's not the only path to getting more customers. Maybe they really like tinkering around with stuff online. Maybe they like writing things. So maybe they would put an advert out, or maybe they're really good at teaching. And so they set it up so that they can offer value by teaching to other people's audiences maybe. And that's how they do it. And so you can see there that their motivation for the end result is high. But if they simply changed from something that they dread to something that fitted them better, they'd be more likely then to do the thing. And so let's go over that again. There's 3 things there, isn't there? Is there a prompt? Because if there isn't, you can add a prompt. Secondly, can you make it easier to do? And thirdly, can you alter your motivation? Maybe by altering the way that you get to the thing that you actually want. Now you'll notice if you want to get rid of things that you don't want, it's exactly the same 3 steps, but you go in the opposite direction. So for instance, is there something I don't want to do? Well, let's check for the prompt. Have I got a load of biscuits, for instance, in full view every time I go into the kitchen? If I want to stop doing Facebook, have I got a prompt on my phone telling me that I've got some new likes? These are the things that we could take away, and it would make it more likely that we don't do the thing. We don't eat the biscuit. We don't go on Facebook. If something is really easy, we can make it harder. Now, I really love chocolate, but I love it a bit too much. And so I make sure that I don't buy chocolate. And the reason for that is when it's in my cupboard, it's really easy for me to go and get it. But when it's in a shop, which is a 15-minute walk away, and then a 15-minute walk back, I've made it harder for me to get to chocolate. I can still get it if I really want it, but it's a lot harder than if it's just in my cupboard in the kitchen. And by the same token, that will probably get rid of or make it much less likely that you'll engage in those kind of behaviours you don't want. And so finally, then it's motivation. It's a case of switching your motivation up so it's something that you intrinsically want less. So let's have a recap on this then. First of all, we saw that we have a lot more information. And so it's not more information that we really need in order to change our behaviour, but some really solid steps of behaviour science. The first one is a prompt. Now, the prompt, of course, needn't be something that reminds you on your phone. There are lots of prompts through the day. Every time I brush my teeth, which I do every day, is a prompt. Every time I put my feet on the floor as I get out of bed is a prompt. Every time I finish dinner is a prompt. So there are lots of these little points through the day that we could anchor behaviours to, because we're always going to be prompted to do them simply because we do them every day, and they're an activity that will always kind of happen. So a prompt doesn't actually need to be something we see or something that buzzes. It can actually be a regular activity, like looking in the mirror or brushing your teeth or putting your feet on the floor first thing in the morning. Second thing we saw was to change the level of ease. So if we want to do something, we make it easier to be able to do. And if we want to do it less, we make it more difficult. And finally, we looked at changing motivation. Like maybe this path to the thing that we want is not the path for us. Maybe there's another path, as there usually is, which we'd find much more amenable. And so in that moment, we get to the same end point, but in a way which we're more likely to do simply because we're more motivated to do that. We're less likely to be deterred by something that we currently find really unpleasant. We find a much more pleasant way to do that very same thing. So to go over the 3 steps again, in this order, whenever you're trying to tweak your behaviour, whether to design things in or design things out, start off with the prompt, then change how easy it is to do, and then look at changing motivation last of all, if you even need to, because the other 2 will probably take care of it. So I hope that's been really useful. If it is, please pass it on to anyone that you know who's interested in behaviour design and would like to design in and out some behaviours for themselves. And if you'd like to work with me directly on this or anything else, then you can find out more about me, Alun Parry, at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. And you don't have to be local to me because I work online through video and telephone calls as well. So thanks very much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast too, because it's free and it means you'll never miss an episode again. So thanks again for listening, and I'll be back on the next one.